Malaysia is reimposing movement restrictions in its capital and surrounding areas as it grapples with a fresh surge of COVID-19. From Wednesday, Kuala Lumpur, Putrajaya and Selangor will be placed under a partial lockdown. The latest curbs will last for at least 2 weeks. Malaysia had been slowly easing its coronavirus restrictions, but cases soared again, with the virus spreading wider and faster in recent days. More than 560 new infections have been added today, taking the tally to over 16,000. Despite the surge in cases, Johor is pushing to fully reopen the border between Malaysia and Singapore. The state's chief minister says he will submit a proposal to the government next week. Now, for more on this, let's get the latest from Afifa Arifin. She joins us now. Afifa, several parts of Malaysia placed under partial lockdowns again. Tell us more.
That's right. So the three main areas which, as you mentioned, have been placed under partial lockdown as part of the CMCO or Conditional Movement Control Order. And these are namely your capital, Kuala Lumpur, your administrative capital, where all your civil servants and government agencies are at in Putrajaya, as well as the state of Selangor for 2 weeks from the 14th of October until the 27th of October. And these three areas and districts, they are your most urbanized and most densely populated areas in Malaysia. So this partial lockdown is set to affect more than 8 million Malaysians living in those areas. The move, of course, comes after the National Security Council said that the number of COVID-19 cases in those affected districts are increasing at an alarming rate. Particularly, they're looking at districts like Petaling, like Gombak, like Klang, which are usually areas that are bustling with economic activities. And so they have decided to impose the CMCO in order to break the chain of infection. So for people living in these areas, it looks like life is back to what it was a couple of months ago under the CMCO period. Tighter restrictions all around. No public gatherings are allowed. This means that schools will be closed, entertainment areas, malls, public parks, mosques, and any sort of religious houses of worship will be closed. Only 2 people per household will be allowed to leave the house to get any sort of necessities. But during this period, of course, economic activity will still be allowed to continue. But inter-district travel and of course, moving out of those areas into other states in Malaysia will not be allowed unless they have valid work documents or letters to allow them to leave those districts. The senior minister in charge of the National Security Council, Ismail Sabri, earlier said that a more detailed SOP will be released. That could be in the coming days before the 14th. But as we know in Malaysia, the number of COVID-19 cases has been very steadily increasing. The country is currently in its third wave of COVID-19 that began on September 20th, and it peaked earlier this month, reaching 691 cases. The number of cases did dip for a bit. However, 63 cases with 6 new clusters all across the country, including the 3 areas that we mentioned that are now once again under partial lockdown.
Afifa, despite this recent surge in cases, though, Johor is proposing reopening its border with Singapore. So how will this work?
So the Johor's Menteri Besar, or the Chief Minister Hassan Mohamad, says that the state government will be presenting a plan to Putrajaya very soon regarding the issue of reopening the borders to Singapore. At the very least, just for the state of Johor, not much detail revealed just yet about what exactly this plan will entail. But we do know that the state government will be laying out the importance of why it is necessary to reopen that border with Singapore. Mainly for the Malaysian workers who used to cross the borders every day, but also for the benefit of the investments in Johor, which are currently suffering. We know that, by and large, this whole border closures has affected Malaysia's economy, but the hardest hit state in terms of economic activity is definitely the southern state of Johor, which, as we know, is just a stone's throw away from Singapore. So we have to bear in mind that for many Malaysian workers, and we're talking about up to 400,000 Malaysians who work in Singapore and who who used to cross the border daily, their lives have been severely impacted. We've seen how, some of them, they have lost their jobs in Singapore. We've seen how they have had to make sacrifices, living away from their family, not being able to see their family for months, and also, having to deal with the higher costs of living in Singapore. But beyond the Malaysian workers, we're also looking at businesses in Johor and how they've been suffering simply because there are no Singaporeans who are crossing the border to spend their dollars. In this sense, we're looking at, how businesses are affected, from retailers to eateries to malls. 70% of their businesses have dropped since the borders were closed. So imagine, 7 months of not having business. Essentially, their lives have been very, very severely affected, which is why this is an important issue that Johorians are pressing for their state government to bring up to a federal level.